moment you're in, it doesn't look like God's doing anything, but what seems mundane and what seems normal and what seems like you do just because you're there, that may be the very thing that God is using to shape you, to train you, and to make you into who He's called you to be.
There's only one secure foundation, and that is who God says we are, because that never, ever changes. And I think that is what started me on my path to freedom.
What God is doing in your life is a continuation of what He was doing in somebody else's life.
There you go.
He's never just doing it in you. He was doing this moment that I'm living out right now. It was with my parents who moved here 30 years ago, along with the founding pastor of Greenwood 30 years ago, to help another ministry that was prominent in our city be formed. And I was born into that. And I just think about all of the conferences I was at and all of the meetings and prayer meetings and all these things when I wasn't paying attention, but I was in the atmosphere that was going to produce my future. And I began to look at all of the moments where I was the junior and senior class president and the first Black Mr. Edison, and I was leading in a multi-ethnic school, and I was raised in a multi-ethnic church, and all of these different things. And I would stand up in front of my entire student body and make them laugh and be the guy who did all the pep rallies and stuff. And I was like, I don't have any formal training. God said, I've been training you this whole time.
Yeah.
And I don't know who needs to hear this right now, but at the moment you're in, it doesn't look like God's doing anything, but what seems mundane and what seems normal and what seems like you do just because you're there, that may be the very thing that God is using to shape you, to train you, and to make you into who He's called you to be. And Matt, Laurie, I am a product of moments where God used where I was to shape me, and then He put me in a foreign environment. I knew church from playing drums and being a part of plays and stuff like that, but leadership? Oh no. And I was on the fast track in leadership in this church where within a 4-year period, not because I wanted the platform, not because I wanted to be anything, I was just serving where I was at. And I went from the sound man to I started working with the youth. And I went from working with the youth and doing a youth ministry called Soul Fly, Sold Out Free Life Youth. And our mascot was a fly. I don't know where we fully got that from, but it worked. And we had thousands of young people coming from all over the city on Sunday nights. And I would do what I do on Sunday mornings, I would do to them in a season where God was allowing me to develop. And that's why I always tell people, like, the dark, the not being seen, the nobody knowing who you are is on purpose, because the dark room is for development. You just think about it. You guys know that right now, all of us have cell phones, and if we want to take a high quality picture, we can pull out our cell phone right now and take it and have it. But just a few years ago, to get a high quality picture, you would have to take the picture, and then you would have to, on the instant cameras, roll it back. And then after you took all your pictures, you had to take the film out and take it to a place that had this one specific area, a dark room. Because the dark room was for it to actually be developed. And in my life, people think that I'm somebody that just came out of nowhere, but I've been in the dark room for a decade.
Come on now.
I've been in a place with no exposure, that God was developing me. See, if you get too much exposure too soon, it ruins that image. And I think the thing that in our generation where people are popping up, it seems like some people are popping up, but anybody who's an overnight success, I always try to figure out how long have they been in the dark room?
Yeah.
Because the dark room is where God develops your character. The dark room is where God keeps working those things out of you that you still can be used on a platform, but you know are nasty behind the scenes. The dark room are the places that God begins to say, change that, stop hanging with those people. And I was in that season, and in 2017, something miraculous happened. It was a moment where God challenged me to be obedient and do less. I can remember it like it was yesterday, 2015 and 16. We saw a little bit of growth, but it was nowhere near what we planned on and what we thought God was going to do. In 2017, after having our best year ever at the time, God said, you need to do less. You need to find the pace of grace. I was like, what in the world are you talking about?
A huge message.
Yeah, yeah, I love this.
I was like,
grace.
I'm only doing a little bit compared to them and them and them. And God said, no, for what I've called you to do. You see, so many times we compare our seed to somebody else's harvest.
Yep.
And we start trying to compare where we are in this moment to what God is trying to do in our lifetime. And God said, you're doing too much. You need to slow down. And I'm sitting there on December 5th, 2017, and I'm with some of our staff members in what we call the Stratop at the time. And Tim Ross, our oversight pastor, stands up and says, you know what, God has been so good to you guys in the past 2 years. Most churches have never seen this amount of growth. And I'm sitting there thinking like, we ain't done nothing. This is nothing. And he said, but it's unsustainable. You need to slow down. And the word God gave me was stride, S-T-R-I-D-E, which means to walk in long, decisive steps in an intentional direction.
Wow.
And I began to search all of the scriptures about Jesus walking everywhere. And you don't, I mean, if I was a son of God and I could stand outside of time and I knew there would be Teslas and I knew there would be horses and I knew there would be Segways, I would have at least had some technology to help me get from city to city. But where you find Jesus is he always walked everywhere. He walked everywhere. And as I begin to search, I mean, at least the only time we find him on a horse is at the end of his ministry and the idea. But the only animal we find him on is a donkey, which is a walking animal. And I begin to think about, why did Jesus do that? It's because if you had 3 years to do everything you were called to do, to turn the world upside down, our culture would tell us hustle, grind, make it, double it, 10x it, all of these different concepts. But Jesus walked. He found the pace of grace. He was graced for a specific pace. It allowed him to walk with others that if he would have ran everywhere, they would have missed moments that miracles happened.
Beautiful.
They would have not been able. It all sums up in the moment where the man comes to Jesus and says, my daughter is dying, will you come? And Jesus says, I'm coming. But he walks. How do we know he walks? Because a woman who had been suffering with the issue of blood for 12 years was able to reach out and touch him. She was in pain and he was going in a pace that he was slow enough that she could touch him. And I know the man was like, yo, hurry up. Like culture is telling us, hurry up. My dream is dying. My ambition is dying. And it's trying to hurry us. But God went at a pace that he knew he was graced for, because he was going to heal the girl who was 12 years old and the woman who had been suffering for 12 years in the same day, because he had found the pace of grace.
Beautiful.
I'm getting excited already on this thing right now. What culture is telling us to do is strive. S-T-R-I-V-E. Use all your effort and energy. Use all your networking. Smooth your way to the top. And God says, hey, promotion comes from me. And when we made that decision to cut back in 2017, it wasn't with some promise on the line. It wasn't with like, if you do this, then I'm going to do this. God was challenging my heart. It was almost like he was saying, I just want to know that you trust me and that you'll obey me no matter what I tell you to do.
I think there was a study that was done that said something like, all of us never compare down, we always compare up. So even if you're the CEO of a huge company, you're gonna compare yourself to the CEO of a bigger company. You never compare yourself to a vice president, for example. Is that something that you've struggled with? I mean, you're obviously super successful. Do you still compare up, or do you ever find yourself struggling with that?
Here's why I love what you're saying, because something I realized as I was going through my own journey to get free from comparison is that success never has a period. It only has commas. Because with every higher level of achievement, all you realize is that there's somebody who's achieved more, right? You get more visibility into the fact that there are other people who have done more than you. And so, and one of the concepts I discuss in the book is this idea of insecure foundations. One of the revelations God gave me about insecurity is that even though as a society we tend to think it's a function of self-esteem, insecurity isn't about self-esteem. Insecurity is about identity. And fundamentally, it's a question of what your identity is secured to.
Okay.
So if you secure your identity to something that is insecure, something that is fickle, it's subject to the shifting opinions of people, you're going to be insecure. So in the area of, professional achievement, that's an insecure foundation. Because, to your point, let's just say that you aspire to one day become a manager. Well, you become a manager, then you realize, oh, wait, there's a director. You become a director, and then it's like, oh, wait, but there's a vice president. So then you become a vice president. Oh, wait, but there's a CEO. The CEO, bigger company. So it never ends. And there are people who they've retired from their career, and they feel completely lost. Why? Because they had secured their identity to the insecure foundation of their job.
That's so good, because it's also, when I was hearing you say that too, there's also the fact that even if you are a manager or you are a VP or the CEO, lots of people want that job.
Oh, yeah.
And will pay the price to get your job. It's like king of the mountain in a sense that, you're the king, but everybody's going to fight. So you can never be at peace because it's on a even if you're a board member or something like that, there's always a better board member.
There's a term limit.
Something, right? So all of those things that we find our identity, you're saying that in your book, there's this underlining fear that we got to keep hustling to keep it. And that's where a lot of our turmoil comes from in our spiritual walk with God. So you compare that to, so what's the answer? I mean, like, how do we solve this problem?
Well, so let me give you a little personal context.
Okay.
So what even put me on the journey for writing this book is, back in 2020. So there is this colloquial term that is used, and it's called lit. Now, lit means amazing. 2020 was going to be lit for me, okay? I had
for all of us.
2 books coming out. Two books coming out. I had a full calendar of speaking engagements. I was supposed to speak in like Singapore and Brazil and Africa. It was going to be an amazing year. Well, I was returning from speaking at a conference in London. This was early February 2020. And as soon as I got back, that's when COVID-19 just took over and speaking engagements got shut down. And I remember one morning I was about to log on to a video conference. And before I logged on, I just happened to open Instagram because I was going to respond to comments from people from the night before. Well, I logged onto Instagram and I caught a glimpse of my news feed. And a friend of mine had made a post that she was going to be speaking at this huge women's conference that usually met in person, but it was going virtual because of the pandemic. And so I saw the post and I was just like, oh, that's cool. And then I scrolled like a little more and there was another friend who was like, hey, I'm so excited to announce I'm speaking at this women's conference. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Scrolled a little more. And I saw another friend and then another and another and another. And I don't follow a lot of people. So it felt like that's all that I saw on my newsfeed. And I knew all the speakers. I knew the host. And Bobby, in that moment, all I could think was, why wasn't I invited?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Why wasn't I invited? Why was I overlooked? Why wasn't I good enough? Like, why was I left out? And it was in the midst of asking those questions. And I felt this like what I can only describe as an emotional ice pick, like stabbing my heart. It was in the midst of that experience that I heard the Holy Spirit ask a different question. The Holy Spirit said, Nona, why does it matter? And I was like, well, it matters because there's this huge event happening and I'm not going to be there. I'm not speaking at it. And then the Lord said, so let me make sure I understand. You believe that you're only as valuable as the speaking invitations you receive. And I was like, well, no, Lord, like I know I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. And then I started to like spout out all the scriptures that we memorize about how, loved we are in God's eyes. And the Lord said, Nona, your problem is not what you know in your head. Your problem is what you believe in your heart. You are insecure.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Because, we talked about this earlier, you look at the resume and it's like, you've done all this stuff and all this. And I was like, Lord, how is it possible that I'm insecure? I think I'm the most secure person on earth. And God said, no, you're insecure because you have secured your identity to an insecure foundation. That's where that insight came from. This was directly from God. And that's when I started on my journey because I was like, well, Lord, if I've secured my identity to an insecure foundation, show me how it happened. And it happens subtly over time. I think many of us become insecure, not because just one day, boom, we're, insecure, but because suddenly over time, we begin to see ourselves through the eyes of other people. And what they think matters, and what they think is important. And so when we're left out, when we're overlooked, when we're not selected, when someone else is selected instead of us, we internalize it as an indictment on our worth. There's only one secure foundation, and that is who God says we are, because that never, ever changes. And I think that is what started me on my path to freedom. Like, for real. And because many of us have memorized the scriptures. We know the scriptures. We can spout them off. We can write them down. But it's not about what we know on our head. It's what we believe in our heart. And that's the source of the insecurity.